Growing up in the Virgin, or for the kids growing up in the Virgin Islands, it was the best place in the world to grow up.
We lived so we could shoot birds whenever we wanted to. We went shooting. It looked like it seemed like every day.
Both of our kids are Harvard graduates. We will have been married for 60 years this September. There was this bull, this great big bull, stomping at the gate. And I called our neighbor and I said, "There's a bull over here at the gate and he looks like he's mad." He said, "Don't get him. I have an appointment."
Hello everybody, welcome to another Kept interview. My name is Matthew, and at Kept our goal is to bridge the gap between generations and share the wisdom and stories of those who have gone before us. And today we have Judith Ann and Cyprian. So let's start at the beginning. Where did you guys grow up? I think I'll start with Judith Ann for this one because you probably grew up a little different. Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I had a beautiful childhood. My sister is 11 months younger than I am, and I have another sister who's 15 years younger. I saw my mother's sisters and my grandparents every single day of my life until I went to college, because my grandparents lived 2 blocks away. One sister lived with my grandparents, another one lived across the street from us, and another one lived on the street behind them. And so we had a ready-made group of friends to grow up with, and so I really had a good childhood. My father's family I saw every single Sunday, and he came from a family of 18. So we met at his mother's house on Sundays, and all my other cousins were there. I went to the neighborhood high school, the neighborhood schools. I got a really good education. Went to college at Howard University. My great aunt sent me to school and met my husband at college. Our junior year, I just finished pledging, and I met him my junior year at Howard. He had transferred from the University of Puerto Rico. We married after we graduated. My husband went to graduate school, then medical school, then a military internship, then 6 months of flight medicine. Then he became a flight surgeon in the Air Force. He was an ROTC all the way through college and joined the Air Force Senior Medical Program. We were stationed in Puerto Rico. He was supposed to go to Edwards Air Force Base in California, and from there he was going to Vietnam. But because he was bilingual, he's very fluent in Spanish. He got a call one day. They needed an officer who spoke Spanish at Ramey Air Force Base in Puerto Rico. And so we were sent to Puerto Rico. And he was in Puerto Rico and then in Arizona. Then he got out of the service and did a residency for 5 years. And then we moved to St. Croix. We will have been married for 60 years this September, and we've had a very interesting life. When we moved to the Virgin Islands, I decided not to work because I felt that the kids always needed a parent upon whom they could depend, and they could never depend on him because of his job. So I was that parent. And I only worked if their class needed a teacher. So for 1 year, I worked the whole year because we had 3 hurricanes at the beginning of the school year and their teacher left the island. So I taught our daughter's 5th grade class. And while I didn't work, I wanted the kids to know that Mom could bake the best pound cake they would ever eat, but Mom could also be chairman of the board. So I was on lots of boards, and I was very active in the Episcopal Church. I was president of the Standing Committee of the Episcopal Diocese, which serves the U.S. Virgin Islands and the British Virgin Islands during the time when we had no bishop. And that was quite an honor because it meant that all of the priests had confidence in me. I served 2 terms. I was the first non-priest and first woman to hold that position. And it was very interesting because in the Virgin Islands, we use seaplanes the way people here use buses. And the diocese headquarters was located on St. Thomas, and we lived on St. Croix. So at least 3 times a week I would have to fly to St. Thomas. And the seaplanes take off on water and they land on water. And then I could walk from the diocesan office there. But it was easier than taking say like a Delta or something like that, okay? So we use seaplanes frequently. Growing up in the Virgin, or for the kids growing up in the Virgin Islands, it was the best place in the world to grow up. We had 2 houses in the Virgin Islands. The second one, the first one, our real estate agent picked out without us even being there. The second one, we were approached twice to see if we were interested in a particular property. The first person was from our church, and we weren't interested because we were satisfied with where we lived. But when our real estate agent said something, we were interested, and so we went to look at this property. It was 14 acres. The driveway was lined with poinsettia plants. The driveway was like, there was a gate from the road, and then maybe 1/8 of a mile, and the poinsettia plants were like this high. You know, so it was a beautiful site with all these poinsettia plants going up to the second gate. The driveway inside the second gate was circular. There was a main house, a guest house, which was built for the owner's mother, and a caretaker's house. And it was a great place to raise kids. It was safe to a point. We never had any problems while we were there. We usually had 4 or 5 dogs and a couple of cats, and there was no public transportation. So we had to take our kids everywhere. So we had more control over the kids than they did in the United States. The kids went to private schools because we wanted them to have kind of like the same kind of experience that they were used to as far as education was concerned. And they got an excellent education. Both of our kids are Harvard graduates. And our daughter went on to become a clinical psychologist. And our son got a free ride from the University of Chicago for an MD, PhD. What else do I want to say about that? Oh, I wanted to say that as a part of the Episcopal religion, I wanted to go back to the Episcopal Church. I was very active in the Episcopal Church and served on 2 national committees. One was World Mission, the other was Black Ministries. I had a chance to travel all over 4 times a year because each commission or committee met twice a year. And I would, at first I would fix all the meals. My husband was very cooperative and did not mind me going. And they did not have too much to do as far as cooking was concerned. But then after a while, I found a book called Where's Mom? Now That You Really Need Her. And so I would cook the meat and let them figure out from Where's Mom what to do next. Because it had recipes, it had things like how to wash your clothes, how to fix a bicycle, how to iron, how to take care of yourself, and things like that. I went to some very interesting places and met very, very interesting people, a lot of different cultures, and I really enjoyed that. Then in 1989, we had a very bad hurricane on the island, and just about 99% of the people either lost their homes or had severe damage to their homes. We did not. When the hurricane came, we heard about it. We were away. He was in Chicago taking a class. My husband is a retired otolaryngologist, head neck surgeon. And I was in Oregon taking a class on how to do hearing tests just in case the audiologist would ever leave. And after the storm, she left, so it really came in handy. And we heard the storm was coming. And so I called a friend at Hess to ask her, do you think it's going to hit St. Croix? And she told us it's going directly at us. And so we both went back home. And we were one of the few people who had hurricane shutters. The people who owned the house were very forward-thinking people, and they had hurricane shutters. And so my husband and our son figured out where to put the hurricane shutters and got them up. It took 3 days, and I washed all the clothes and cooked all the food. And we had a couple from Hess that stayed in the guest cottage, didn't have anyone for the other cottage. And the doors, the last door that went on the house, the main house, you put on from the inside, and it barred across. The hurricane hit the island for about 13 hours. Wow. And when we took the shutters off, it looked like a bomb had been dropped. We had a lot of mahogany trees. There were mahogany trees all over the place. It took 3 days for 3 adults with 3 chainsaws to cut a walking path to the road because the house was like 1/4 of a mile from the road. We had no electricity. We lived without electricity for 6 months. Fortunately, we had a generator that we turned on for 2 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the evening. But for the first month or so, there was no place to get gas because the gas stations were hit. I mean, everything. For our son's school, only 1 classroom survived. And the parents and Hess Oil repaired that 1 classroom so that his class was able to graduate. It was bad. The grocery stores, it took about 2 months to open, so we were dependent upon food being flown in for us to eat. Fortunately for the people that Hess was Hess Oil, and it was like a self-contained city. And so we would go over there and shower and get ice every day. And they had food over there, and so we would take some of that back with us. In the Virgin Islands, medicine is just a little bit different. I also should tell you that the hospital was destroyed. Okay, so they had to build a tent hospital for the people for the doctors and everything to be able to serve people and help people. My husband had a private practice in the afternoon, and in the morning he worked for the government. And I'm so glad he did that because he gets a pension now. And that really helps out. I mean, it's a sacrifice to do that because it cuts into your income because you don't make as much, but it came in handy in the long run. What else do I want to say? Oh, so we left I want to tell you about our property because it was a beautiful property. I mentioned it before. The owner asked us to make an offer, and my husband made a ridiculous offer, and she accepted. And then she wanted a retainer, and we had half of that because he had just furnished a private office. And then 3 days before our closing, the sale for our house fell through, and she took out a second mortgage. So she really wanted us to have this house. It had a generator house, it had a fish pond, and it had a greenhouse, and there were orchids all over the place. It was beautiful. The name of the property was Turk's Head. We changed it to Estate Providence because it was by the goodness of God that we were able to get this property. And we used the caretaker's house for anybody that needed a home. I think the first person that came there was someone that worked at the hospital. His wife died, and he lost his house, and we let him stay there for a while. But we used it for missionaries, for visiting clergy. It didn't matter what denomination. And we didn't charge. We didn't charge. We were so thankful to have that property. That property sold 2 years ago for over $3 million. And we paid maybe say like $200,000 plus for it. Can you believe that? And our kids didn't want it because it didn't have a pool. They wanted us to buy a condo with a pool. But it was a property that deserved to have a family there, and so we said, and the reason we came back to the States, because when my husband asked me to marry him, he told me at that time he wanted to go back to the Virgin Islands, and I said, fine, as long as he retired. When he retired, we could come back to the States. And so when he retired, we moved to Florida, to Orlando. My mother and my two sisters were there at the time. And his step-grandmother was there. By that time, I wanted something that was lock and go so that we could travel a lot. And so we did a lot of traveling. And then my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And this is where it gets sad. And I realized that maybe after 3 years after the diagnosis, that I couldn't take care of him by myself anymore. So we went to a hotel, and I had the movers come and put everything in storage. You have to excuse me. I decided not to drive because my sight is not as good. And whenever my husband was in the car, I was more focused on him than I was driving. So but that's the only thing I miss. I still keep up with my book club in Orlando, and my club. I belong to a sorority and a national women's club, and I keep up with the National Women's Club by Zoom. Now, since we've been here, my husband has had a blood clot that has since dissolved. He was a prostate cancer survivor from 1996 until 2025, and the prostate cancer metastasized to the liver. And then, what else happened to you, Sip?
Symptoms.
Oh, Alzheimer's, dementia, mild to moderate. So, it's been a journey. It's been a journey. And I don't know if Sip wants to tell you, he's not able to, the kind of Parkinson's he has is motion disorders. So anything that moves, he has problems with. You'll notice he doesn't blink as often. His vocal cords, are being affected now, so he talks very softly. And then having the Alzheimer's dementia and the brain problems, the neurological problems that go along with the Parkinson's. It's difficult for him to express himself at times. So that's why I did most of the talking. But Sip, what part of the journey do you want to tell them?
I'm curious of how you grew up. Where did you grow up, and how do you look at life from your angle of where you grew up?
Well, I grew up in the Virgin Islands.
St. Croix.
St. Croix. And my experience was one where my parents were there all the time. From the time I was young, all the way through high school. They were there for me and for the other kids. I had two sisters and one brother. And we all grew up together, and all the way to, I guess, the time when they were graduated from high school. They came from there to, they kind of almost followed me.
Not really. Tell them about Puerto Rico.
You
went to private high school, Episcopal high school.
Well, we went to private schools together. Both myself and my oldest daughter.
Sister.
Sister.
She was at Robinson. You were at
At Robinson.
You were at Julius San Justo.
I was at San Justo. Well, let me tell you, San Justo was an all-boys school.
My husband went to an Episcopal boys' school in Puerto Rico. The Bishop of the Virgin Islands at that time was very forward-thinking. And when he found teenagers who were really smart, he got them scholarships to go to the Episcopal school in Puerto Rico. And that's where he learned Spanish. And he was there for high school. He was the salutatorian in his class. And then he went to the University of Puerto Rico for 2.5 years. They taught in Spanish, and it was getting hard. And so that's when he transferred from Howard. Tell them something about your childhood with your friends and how safe it was, and how you all used to shoot the pigeons. And tell them. He had a wonderful childhood.
We grew up so we could shoot birds whenever we wanted to. We went shooting. It looked like seemed like every day. But whenever we were free, we would go shooting. We shot a lot of birds. You know, we didn't let the birds just lie there. We would get those birds and then take them back with us. And Mrs. Nisa, who was the woman, her name was Nisa.
Mm-hmm.
She cooked.
The mother of one of your friends.
Mother of one of my friends. She would cook the birds for us, and we would eat the birds. So we had the birds.
What did you shoot them with?
BB guns.
BB guns.
BB guns or pellet guns.
That's cool.
And we were very good at it too.
I bet. Got a lot of practice.
Oh yes, it was fun.
But they have a rainforest in the Virgin Islands, and that's where they would play a lot. It was very safe, and it was he could roam all over.
Wow.
His family home it is a National Historical Landmark. It used to belong to the Queen of Denmark. You know, St. Croix was owned. The Virgin Islands were owned by many different countries, and Denmark was
7 different countries. Denmark was one.
Yeah, Denmark was the last one, I think.
Yes.
And it belonged to the Queen of Denmark, and his family bought it from them.
My grandfather eventually acquired an estate
His grandfather,
that covered about 7 acres. 700 acres. But my father acquired about 500.
No.
400. 400.
No, your father, none. His grandfather was the first one to sell his estate for quite a bit of money. And his grandfather was the one who did a lot of reading and named his son Cyprian Alpheus. And so my husband is junior and our son is the third. There's a street in the Virgin Islands named after his grandfather, the Percy A. Gardines Avenue, and there's a school in the Virgin Islands, a junior high school named after his mother, the Juanita Forbes Gardines School. It was a junior high school. Both of his grandfathers were senators in the Virgin Islands, in the legislature there. And his father was also a senator. It was just a beautiful place to raise kids. But I would tell people we would make sacrifices to live in paradise because, for example,
they did pretty much what they wanted.
We didn't have, if you lived in the city itself, Christiansted was at one end of the island and Frederiksted was at the other. And we lived closer to Christiansted. We had to go to the mailbox every day to pick up our mail, head to the post office. We had to stop at a store every day to pick up a paper. Prices of food were unusually high. I mean, a box of cereal now, the last time someone told me it cost like $15 for a box of cereal. You know, before the U.S. Virgin Islands took over, everybody had a side business. They had their own garden, or they would raise chickens and sell the eggs, or raise pigs and sell meat. There was no welfare, okay? But when the U.S. welfare came to the Virgin Islands, it kind of like destroyed that what was it, way of life that they had, and that was not good. And another interesting thing about the Virgin Islands was that the neighborhoods were called estates because they were estates. And you could have a beautiful house and then have a farm or a shack or something like that. I remember one day I went to the gate. I was going out and I went to the gate. There was this bull, this great big bull stomping at the gate. And all I could do was reverse. And I called our neighbor and I said, "There's a bull over here at the gate and he looks like he's mad. Can you come get him?" And the neighbor said, "We were looking for him. We're selling him because he's too mean." I said, "Don't get him." I have an appointment. And then another time I came home and my neighbor on the right said, my dogs didn't come to the gate, and that was unusual, okay? And so my neighbor called me and he said, hollered, he said, Judy, he said, your dogs have a pig cornered down here. So I went down there and there was a baby pig. And so we had two Bouviers, they're Bouvier de Flanders, they're French sheepdogs. I took them one by one and put them in the garage. I put Jack Russell in the garage. I put the Cruiser dog in the garage and the other dog in the garage so that I could get to the pig. And so we got the pig, put him in a blanket, and I called, what is it that you call for pets? It wasn't a veterinarian.
It was vet.
Was it the vet? No, it wasn't a vet. It was a public thing that they have, anyway. I called them. It wasn't the Humane Society. It was like a Humane Society
That's
for
what
animals.
it was in the Virgin Islands.
It's like a Humane Society for animals. I called them and I said, I have a baby pig here. Could you come get it? My dogs had it cornered. And so they said, no, it was close to closing. They couldn't come get it. I said, if you don't come get it, my dogs are going to kill it. So they said, okay, we'll send someone by. So they did. Someone came by and picked it up. So I called the following Monday, to see how the pig was doing. That pig never made it. Whoever picked it up killed it and ate it.
Oh my.
Yes. I said, that's the last time I call you.
Yeah.
I should also tell you that my husband played the steel pans as a teenager.
I made them too.
Yeah, he made them also. Are you familiar with steel pan?
I'm not.
Okay, it makes beautiful music. That's how I lost my hearing in my my first steel pan lesson. It blew my hearing.
Oh my.
And I was the one that did the hearing test in the office. And I still have that hearing loss from that. But it makes beautiful music. When you have a chance, just Google steel pans or steel pan music.
What is it like?
It's just that, usually they play calypso music, but you can play any kind of music with it. They have them here in the United States now, brought from the islands. And his first instance of discrimination was when the band came to the States and they were booked to eat at this particular restaurant, and the restaurant would not allow them to eat in the dining hall. They had to eat downstairs in the basement. Remember that when you were telling me about that? Yeah, that was his first.
That was my first experience with segregation.
And prejudice. For the kids, with the school they went to, there were just so many nationalities represented there.
Because my kids were very smart.
Yeah.
They outlived the situation, or beat the situation. Lucky.
So it was like they were growing up with a little United Nations, which was excellent.
That's super cool.
For the kids, and particularly in coming to the States and getting along with people. We sent our kids to summer school in the States because we wanted them to know that, and they wanted to know if they would be able to meet the stateside standards. And we sent them to Northfield Mount Hermon, which is in Massachusetts, outside of the Boston area someplace. And they always enjoyed that. We sent them there their first 2 summers of high school, and the last 2 summers they went to, they had to work because I wanted them to know they were going to work when they were in college, which they did, which proved very, very good for them. When they went to Northfield, we were told both times, because this was their concern, that they not only met the standard, they set the standard. So that was good for both of them to know. Our son was more laid back than our daughter. Our son was also a presidential scholar for the Virgin Islands 1 year.
Wow.
The year he graduated,
Yeah.
he was a presidential scholar.
Our daughter had meningitis. Where were we? We were in Puerto Rico. We were in Puerto Rico when she had meningitis. Okay, she had meningitis when she was 3. And I asked her she was complaining of a headache. We were living in Puerto Rico. And I asked her to take her chin and touch her chest because meningitis draws you back like that. And she couldn't do it. So I was concerned because she had never heard me complain about a headache. But I took her to the hospital. My husband was on that night at the Air Force Base. And I said, Jamie has meningitis. I would like for you to do a spinal tap.
This was in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I mentioned Puerto Rico. And they said, no, they just couldn't do a spinal tap like that. So brought her back home. The next day, I took her back because she had a fever. They gave her medication for the fever. After 3 hours, it did not come down. They were going to send me back home again, and I said, you're going to hospitalize this child. I'm not taking her back home. They did a spinal tap. She had meningitis. The kind of meningitis she had, they told me, it was not contagious. I said, these kids did not play with each other. I said, there are 3 kids on the Air Force Base that had meningitis. They did not play with each other. They did not use the officer's pool. The only thing they had in common was that the parent of each child visited the parent of the child who was in the hospital. So there was one child, and we went to visit her parents, and somebody came to visit us. Our child was the second. I said, one day you're going to find that this type of meningitis is contagious, and it's carried by adults. Within 5 years, they did.
Wow.
Okay, and now every kid gets a shot for it by the time they're 2 years old.
Wow.
With our son,
They have to have it.
yeah, with our son, one day after school, I went to pick him up. This was in the Virgin Islands, St. Croix. He was a beautiful athlete, and they held up his shoes. And that meant he was at the hospital. And I thought it meant he was at the hospital to get oxygen because he had to, because he has asthma. And so I prayed, Lord, he was yours before he was ours. And I took my groceries home, and I put my cold stuff up, and my neighbor's alarm was going off, and I debated whether to go over there and turn it off or not. But I decided I better get to the hospital and pick him up. And I go to the hospital, and I didn't see him. So in the emergency room, I went through all the cubicles, only on St. Croix. Can you do that? Didn't see him. Was getting ready to go into a room, and the nurse stopped me and said, don't go in there. Your husband's in there with your son. And that's when I really became aware of what was going on around me. And I saw the dean of the upper school, middle school, the dean of the middle school, and he was in hysterics. And I saw a student, and he was in shock. And apparently the dean had decided that even though what had happened was our son went to the office, and he said, I don't feel well, and collapsed. And they called the emergency room for the ambulance, and the dean decided he could get him there before the ambulance could get there and get him back. And so they put him in a car. The student did CPR, and the dean drove. The teachers were not required to know CPR, but the students were in high school. And they took him. They called my husband, and my husband prayed the same prayer that I did. And when my husband got to the hospital, the emergency room doctors were walking out. My husband and the father of his best friend, who was also a doctor, worked on our son for 3.5 hours. And let's see, I'm going to switch back to what I saw. But they worked on him for 3.5 hours. But in the meantime, once I realized then how serious the situation was. And so I prayed, Lord, he's my only son. And God spoke to my heart and said, I have an only son too. And then I prayed, Lord, who sent us with this child? And God spoke to my heart and said, so I can receive the glory. And I don't remember praying anything the the last time God spoke to my heart, but he said, have faith in God. And so I just told myself, I was thinking that as long as my husband was in there, he was okay. But, and that's when I really went into prayer after that. And I tell this story every opportunity I have a chance to, because we could have lost our son. Then my husband came down 3.5 hours after I was there, and he was exhausted. So I said, you go home, I'll stay with him. And I called our minister, and he came up. And they wanted me to call the minister before, but I wouldn't. I said, he's not dead. I'm not going to call the minister. But the minister came. His wife started prayer chains, not only in the Virgin Islands, but in all the other islands that were down islands below the Virgin Islands, in England, in the United States. And that morning, our son woke up. He had no brain damage, no heart damage, no lung damage, and was released from the intensive care unit from the hospital.
Wow.
Which was something.
It's a miracle.
It was. He could not do sports after that, okay? It was something very, very hard for him to accept. He had exercise-induced asthma. He has since overcome it with medication and shots. And he's 52 now, and from 40 to 50, he ran marathons. So that was, yeah. But he met his wife during that time. She was an exchange student on St. Croix. And her aunt was the gym teacher, the girls' gym teacher. And that's when he met his future wife. And they became girlfriend and boyfriend. And they were girlfriend and boyfriend all the way through the rest of high school. This was like the 8th grade and college. And they got married after college. And they've been married. They celebrated their 30-something year. Was it this year they went to Spain or last year? This year. It was this year. They went to Spain to celebrate their 30th something wedding anniversary.
That's something.
You know.
Talking about people meeting and getting married, how did you guys meet, and what was the first time you saw each other, and the first time you one of you asked the other person out?
You want to tell them that story?
Well, you can tell it.
Okay. I sort of remember this part. My girlfriends and I were at the movies, and it was dark outside when we got out. There were there were 4 of us. And so one of my girlfriends saw a guy that she knew, and so the guy asked a group of guys that he was with, because he wasn't walking with them, he was going someplace else, if they would see us to our dorms, because it was dark outside and our dorms were off campus. And so he walked with me, and I did not remember that. What I remember is 3 months later, he saw me standing outside of the dorm, outside of one of the dorms, on campus dorm, waiting for my roommate to go to the off-campus dorm. And he asked if he could walk me to the dorm. And I said, yeah, but we have to wait for Mert. Her name was Mertis. And so his friend saw him waiting, and so his friend stopped. And so Sib and his friend walked us to our dorms, and we agreed to meet for dinner. And I told my roommate, as soon as we could get away from them, I said, I'm going to marry him. And then I started seeing him all over the place after that, and he asked me out, and that's how it was.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, our junior year in college.
And then how long did you date before you got married? Or?
But
We dated until that was in May that we met, and the following February we were engaged, and that September we married.
Nice.
You know, both of us wanted to get our degrees first before we married. You know,
Gotcha.
So yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
If you could go back and change anything, do you have any big regrets that you just wish you wouldn't have done or you would change?
You know, I always wanted to be a child psychiatrist, but I'm glad that I did not pursue that. I mean, it came to a point in my life, I didn't know that I had a gift in working with children and in working with special children, but I did. And that's why I wanted to be a child psychiatrist. But if I did, then I don't think our kids would be where they are today. Okay, I mean, I was basically a stay-at-home mom, and was able to do a lot of things with our kids. And I think also one of the biggest things that helped our success, and I know, were our parents. Okay, we were raised well. We were raised with a good sense of decency and of right and wrong. I think that's missing. A lot of that is missing today. But I think that's what we owe a lot of our success to. Our parents were hard workers, and so are we, and so are our children. And so we have to recognize that.
How are your children? Are they believers?
Our son is. Our daughter is mixed with mixed with Buddhism. Okay, they did not bring our daughter, and I think this was the influence of Harvard. Okay, our daughter had her daughter baptized. But when I asked her why they didn't go to church, she said, well, she was going to let her choose her own religion. I said, well, how is she going to know which religion to choose if she doesn't go to church? But my daughter and her family do not go to church. And that has been a difficult, for us, because we have a granddaughter growing up who doesn't know the Lord. Our daughter knows, and she's making choices. So we have to accept that. We pray for all of our kids and all of our grandkids. And we have 2 great grands every day. My husband and I end each day with prayer together.
All right. So this whole kept is our ministry is you guys sharing advice with my generation. Yeah, what would you say to that generation, this up and coming generation? What is some advice you'd give them?
Okay, they may not like my advice, but this is my advice. First, you need, how can I put this? Because it's religious, okay? You need to know and honor God in your life. Okay, I think that's very important. I think the Bible is a book that is for all generations. And if you follow the advice in the Bible, and if you're obedient to the Lord, I think you have a different kind of life. Okay, that's my first advice. My second advice is you need to equip yourself for life, meaning you either need a vocation or you need a college degree, depending on what your interests, are, or you need to go into the military. Okay, military is good for a lot of people because it brings discipline to their lives, and some people have not had that before. Particularly for young women, my advice is before you start having children, you need to have a vocation or an education, because you never know what life is going to bring, and you need to be prepared to be able to provide for the children you bring into the world. Stay true to God and stay true to yourself, and you won't go wrong. People think, well, you're a doctor, and so life is easy. But, when he was going to medical school and everything, I think I had $15 a week to shop. I'd walk 1.5 miles with my little cart to the grocery store because we didn't have a car. And I'd buy a chicken, and I'd buy 2 pounds of ground beef, and I'd buy 2 cans of tuna fish and rice. And, we always stayed on a budget. And to this day, we still have a budget. We're not able to stay on it as much as we would like to because so many unexpected things have come up. But it's good. We have always lived within our means, and for future generations, I would say it is good to live below your means. And they also need to learn that every decision they make, every choice they make has a consequence. And the consequences can be good or bad. And they have to think about the decisions and the choices that they make.
You guys touched on how you guys have been married for so long. What is one of the key reasons that you guys are still married? The divorce rates these days are so high. How did you guys stay together?
Because we have the Lord in our lives. He's first. And I think that's the reason why. And I have to give a lot of credit to my husband, okay? Because my husband knew I was coming to a strange place where the customs and everything were different. And he gave me the freedom to do whatever it is I wanted to do. And I did a lot of volunteer work. And being away, being able to go away. And every time I went away on the trips for the national commissions, I stayed a week because the meetings were maybe a little bit longer than a week, I'd say, yeah, but at least a week. The meetings were like 3 to 4 days. And I would go to visit my parents or other relatives or friends while I was in the States. And he gave me the freedom to do that. The kids would go to his office after school. The bus would drop them off there. And then they'd go home and they'd all fix dinner together. And he'd help them with their homework and everything. So a lot of it goes to his willingness to give me the freedom to do.
That's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
I just want to say I'm glad that my wife was able to give you some insight, because the way I am now, I can't give you very much. I can remember things sometimes when she talks about it. But everything that she said is basically correct. And I wouldn't bet against any of it. If I had to stand up in court, talk about it. So, you got it.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.